Hello, welcome to Hello, this is an introductory Python tutorial. In this video you are going to learn about lists in Python. It is intended for beginners and it will teach you about how to use lists. It will teach you how to create them, how to create matrices using lists, how to index them, how to add and remove items from them, and a few other neat tricks you want to know about lists. It's intended for people with no programming background, and I hope you will find it useful and learn something today. As always, I recommend you to go to anaconda.com and install its programming environment. It will be identical to my own, and you will be able to follow all of the tutorials that I have step by step, and it will be very convenient and simple for you. So let's get started. Lists. Just like in real world, like you would write a list in real world, programming lists are just a sequence of items that you may want to contain, and it's a data structure that you can use to contain any type of item. It could be strings, it could be integers, whatever you want. In some other programming languages, lists are also called arrays, but in Python they are called lists. So let's go ahead and create our first list. Type 2 square brackets and type 1, 2, 3. There you go. This is our list. As simple as that. Note that list able to contain all sorts of all types of values. For example, this list will contain a string, an integer, and a float. There's no problem. It might not be used very frequently, but it is a possibility. It does matter to list what kind of variable it contains. So that's that. Next one, nesting lists. As I've said, since a list can contain any other kind of variable, any other kind of type of data, it can also contain lists, because it is also a type of data. So let's create 3 lists and assign them to variables. List 1, list 2, and list 3, like so. Then we can put them all into one list. And a nested list is called a matrix because it will be two-dimensional. Like in math, a matrix is a grid of numbers like so, and nested lists allow you to represent them. So if you want to create a matrix out of it or nested list, we just write it like so. We create a list out of these 3 variables. So it will look like this. Let's type matrix to make it visible. Excellent. As you can see, I have put all of these variables into this list. Now there are 2 pairs of parentheses. These ones, the outer ones, contain the whole list, and these ones contain the first element. So, how are we going to access it? Well, first, let's move on to indexing and slicing, and you will learn how to access the matrix also. So it works pretty much identical to the way it works with strings. So let's say I create a list of names, and now I want to get the first name. As I've said in my previous video, lists are started, all strings and lists are 0 indexed. That means the first element is actually called 0th element, and the second one is called first, etc. So everything is shifted by 1, and it all starts from 0. So if I want to get my first name, I just type the list variable and put 0 in brackets after it. And there you go. I got my first name. I am also able to slice lists. Slicing means you get a few elements of it, like not all of them, but starting from the first let's say I want to start with the second element and get the rest of the list until the end. I would do it like so. So I have started with the element number 2, including it, and got the rest of the list too. If I want to start with go from the beginning of the list and then get up to this one, I would also, or up to Brita, I would do it like so. Note that the beginning element, if you put it at the beginning, it will be included. So Jeff is second element and it is included in the result. But ending element will not be included. So third element is Brita, and it is not included in the resulting list. So it includes the first one, but up to, but not including the third one. Very well. Also, I want to note that you can use negative indices. If you type -1, it will return you the last element. -2 will return second to last, etc. Excellent. So now on to accessing elements of the matrix. So just as with the list, you can just type matrix 0 and it will return you the first element of the matrix. But what if you want to access one of these numbers, one of the inner numbers? Well, it's very easy. You can simply add one more set of braces to it, brackets, and you can type the number of the index of the element that you want to access. So if I want to access 3, I would type 2 here. That returns this element. So this notation allows you to access elements in the nested lists. So for example, what if I want to grab 6 from this list? I would type matrix. This will be the first. This list will have index of 1 and 6 will have index of 2 within it. So I would type 1 and 2 like so. Of course, if I am not going to make a typo, it's going to work. Excellent, that works. So moving on, now that you know how to access list elements, let's learn how to add them. The easiest way to do that is to simply use plus sign, and that will so-called concatenate the list. So taking my list and adding Shirley to it will concatenate the two lists and add this element to this one, like so. Now the Shirley is at the end of the list. Note that if I will call the list right now, look at that, this variable still contains the old list. So this operation does not happen in place. This operation returns the new list, but if you want the initial list variable to change, you need to reassign it, like so. We would need to type list equals this. So this operation would add an element to the list and assign it to its previous variable, like so. Now my list will contain all the names. Just out of curiosity, not a frequently used operation is multiply. If I want to repeat the list multiple times, I can just type my list multiplied by 2, and the list will be repeated several times, like so. Oh, by the way, there are surely have been added several times because I have added I have run this cell several times. Okay, now let's learn how to remove elements, especially since we have extra Shirleys over here. The operation for this is called pop. So I type my list.pop and it will return the last element and remove it from this list. Unlike the concatenation operation, this operation modifies the actual variable. So if I check out my list right now, you will see that it lacks the last two shortlists because I have run this operation twice and it removed the shortlist twice. There you go. If you want to store this element that I have removed from the list into a variable, you can do that. You can simply do s equals my list dot pop, and by the way, you can also specify which element you want to remove. So just as always, you can just specify its index. So if you want to remove the first element, you can just type pop 0. Now if you look at the element that got removed, it's the first element, and if you look at the list variable, as you can see, it was modified in place. Excellent. So, other methods that I wanted to mention about lists, some more things that you would like to know that will be very useful to you. First of all, there is a function called len that calculates the length of the list. There you go, the list contains 5 elements. Another very useful function is sort. So if I type my list.sort, it will sort it in alphabetical order. Very nice and very convenient. If the list would contain numbers, they would be sorted in ascending order. And one more very convenient feature is reverse. By the way, don't forget that after typing a dot, you can press tab several times to see all sorts of classes that the list object has. So Jupyter Notebook will conveniently help you out if you forgot which one you want to use. So if I do reverse and tab, it will suggest me reverse. And as you can probably guess what it does, it reverses the list. So now it's backwards. Shortly is first, Pierce is second to first, etc. So there you go. These are the fundamentals of lists. The final thing I wanted to tell you about is comprehensions. If this is the first time you are exposed to the programming, you will probably not be able to follow it, and don't worry about it, that's okay, because in the future I will make a dedicated tutorial about comprehensions after we have learned about for loops and stuff like that. But for now, let's recreate our matrix so that it would be easy to see what's going on. Imagine our goal would be to grab the first column of the matrix. So I want to access all of the elements in the first column. If I would want to access the first row, it would be very simple. Like, this is the first row, and I would just type matrix and 0 in brackets, and it would contain the first row. But what if I want to get the vertical column? Well, I would need to take this element and grab its first element. Then I would need to take this element and grab its first element, and this one and grab its first one, and I would need to add them together. It sounds like a bunch of complicated steps, but you can actually do it in one line of code, like so. Now first column contains the first column of our matrix, 1, 4, and 7. So how does this work? Well, I don't know if you're familiar with for loops. If not, it's okay. As I've said, I'm going to explain to to you more about them later, but basically for loop will go through every element of the matrix. So it takes the matrix variable and it goes for each row, like for this one, and for this one, go grab the first element. So it's kind of backwards. Take the matrix, go through each of its rows and grab its first element. And then this first element, as the whole expression is put into brackets, the first element will be added to this list. So there you go, the result, you have this list. If you didn't quite follow it, it's okay. Again, I will explain it in much more detail further later. So that's it. That's the list in Python for you. Very useful, very simple, very convenient. I hope you will practice creating some lists, adding elements to them, removing elements from them, using indices, and get familiar with them. Just get comfortable with them because you will be using them a lot, especially if you're interested in machine learning and stuff. It's all about the lists and matrices, so make sure you understand this stuff very well. Okay, so I really hope this was useful to you, and I'll see you in my future videos.